Loud. And give you a moment to click on got it.
Becker resolution to expand the powers of
Yep. And then please mute yourselves if we're going to be explaining in the next slide, please. That we are recording the presentation. We want you to stay muted. We are going to ask that you use the chat box, which is at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions during the presentation, please put your questions there. And then Sue Murawski will be moderating the Q&A session at the end. And that's where we will address any questions in the chat box. And then a toolkit and recording will be provided at the after this program is over to all the participants, and it will also be elsewhere, so that if you have other colleagues in your bird town or your EAC or your Audubon chapter, you can access that. Next slide. Let me just say and introduce the panel. Again, I'm Lee Altadonna. I'm the president of also of a local chapter, Philadelphia's chapter, part of Montgomery County, and the Pennsylvania Audubon Council, which is a coalition of the 20 Audubon chapters across the Commonwealth. Susan Murawski is on the Pennsylvania Audubon Council board, but she is the president of Presque Isle Audubon Society in Erie. Farron Savitz is the zero waste advocate of Penn Environment, and Penn Environment is the preeminent organization that is an expert on this particular issue. They've been involved with plastics for years, and they are a guide for many of the other organizations across the state and take the lead. Richard Metz is Springfield Township, Montgomery County's Environmental Advisory Committee, but more importantly, he does a lot of coordination with other EACs and bird towns in this part of southeastern Pennsylvania on this particular issue. And then Heidi Shiver is president of Birdtown, Pennsylvania, and she is going to be doing some presentations as well. And again, we welcome chapter leaders, Birdtown leaders, and folks that are friends of Penn Environment or of other EACs that are involved with this program. Next slide. We'll go to the next slide here. Just very quickly, why the Pennsylvania Audubon is presenting this program tonight is because we have developed with our chapters education and outreach statements that are on the high priority issues as identified by our chapters. And the single-use plastic and the reduction of single-use plastic is one of the conservation priorities that have been identified by our chapters of high priority. Next slide. We have on our website this booklet. You just saw the cover, but it talks about the conservation issue. It gives some background. It gives some other kinds of information, and then who helped to write the statements, which was really, really important as well. And I'm just going to give you a general outline. Next slide. Each of the education and outreach statements have 2 pages in our conservation issues booklet. We give a general introduction to the issue. We provide some background. We also talk about the dates and the individual who was the primary contributor or who drafted the statement. And we do this for all of the issues, and you'll see in a moment how it applies to single-use plastics. Next slide. This is the way we arrayed ways to become involved, so that our chapters had some opportunities. We do not have a prescriptive approach with our education and outreach statements. What we do is to try to provide a range of ways that we can engage our members, or chapters can engage members. They might do things at the individual member level, so that they work with on any of these issues to have members of their organization or community organizations do some work and understanding in terms of what the issue is. We want them to act on the municipal level. This is where bird towns and EACs are particularly critical. Sometimes park advisory boards in some of the communities are extremely important, so that action might happen at the municipal level. And then we also have opportunities when there is state legislation or federal legislation. We try to educate and advocate so that there might be sign-on letters or ways for people to get to their elected officials at the state and federal level to take some action. There's a role outlined for the council in helping in each of these categories. And we also look at other partners. Tonight, Penn Environment is the preeminent partner, but could be Audubon Mid-Atlantic, a National Audubon Society, and it could be Penn Future or other organizations as well that get involved in all three of these areas to help support the issue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sue Morosky, who will give you a little bit of a deeper dive into how this outline and education outreach statement for single-use plastics is organized. Susan?
Okay, thank you, Lee. This is my paper, Elimination of Single-Use Plastics in the Environment, and it was actually geared towards birds, but it really applies to every living thing. And I'm not going to read all the details in this position paper because you can read it in on our Pennsylvania Audubon Council website if you want to. But the key point to know here is that pollution of our environment because of single-use plastics, it's a threat to birds, other wildlife, and all living things. And everybody here knows examples of single-use plastics like styrofoam takeout containers or straws, cutlery, shopping bags. They're convenient, but that's their only positive quality, in my opinion. Convenience is heavily outweighed by plastic's negative effects on our environment. And just how bad are single-use plastics? Well, what we're doing is taking carbon that was buried over 100 million years ago and turning it into plastic that's used one time. And that's crazy. They're made out of fossil fuels. Drilling for these fuels and turning them into plastic heavily pollutes our air, our land, and our water. 300 million tons of plastic are produced each year worldwide, half of that for single-use plastics. And that's hard to think about, that you're making something that half of it you're going to throw away. And it's not even thrown away properly most of the time. It ends up as trash frequently. In fact, half of global plastic waste is from single-use plastics. It's also a justice issue because petrochemical plants that produce plastic are located generally in poor community. And plastics' bad effects, they continue. They don't biodegrade, they just break down to microplastics, which have been found to be everywhere, including inside our bodies. 90% of tested seabirds had microplastics in their gut. 100% of sampled Pennsylvania waterways contain microplastics. Lastly, very few single-use plastics are recyclable, and even if so, only 5% are actually recycled in this country. So the answer to single-use plastic pollution is basically we have to curb our consumption. And we can all act on a personal level to stop using single-use plastics, and I would guess that most people on this webinar already do that. But more importantly, we need to work with others to address this problem because it's just so big and individual actions are not enough. Next slide, please. Pennsylvania Audubon Council's education and outreach statement on single-use plastics. And I'm not going to go into the details of this chart because, again, it's on our website, the Pennsylvania Audubon Council's website, like Lee mentioned earlier, and you can review it on your own if you're interested. It's sufficient to say that in each of the 9 blocks of this chart, there are examples of actions a person or a group can take to reduce the use of single-use plastics, and that's at the individual, or the community municipal, or the state federal levels. And tonight we're going to focus on the actions in the middle column, and that's those done at the community and municipal level. Our next speaker is Farron Savitz from Penn Environment, and he'll introduce us to their toolkit for dealing with plastics.
Thanks, Sue. And thanks for that introduction into plastics. Again, I'm Farron Savitz. I'm with the Penn Environment and the Penn Environment Research and Policy Center. If you're not familiar with us, we're a statewide environmental nonprofit. We work on a range of issues from climate change to clean air, clean water, open spaces. As a zero waste advocate, I've spent the past several years working with townships, with cities, with boroughs, including Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and potentially many of your neighbors, on tackling single-use plastic pollution. I'll do a sort of quick overview on why plastic is an issue. I'll talk about what's been happening in Pennsylvania, what resources Penn Environment has, and then we'll also have time for questions later, I think. So next slide. So the problem with plastic, essentially, is that we use a ton of stuff. And a lot of that is plastic made to be used once. If you think about the plastic bags you get from a grocery store, you think about plastic straws, a bag of chips, a coffee cup, water bottles, takeout containers, the packaging in an Amazon box. The list sort of goes on and on and on. We use these items for a couple of minutes and then we throw them away. But the problem is there is no away. Whether plastic goes to a landfill, an incinerator, if it ends up littered in our environment, it's causing harm to our wildlife, it's causing harm to our health and our great open spaces. Every year, Americans generate about 35 million tons of plastic waste, and less than 6% of that gets recycled. And I'm sure we've all seen images of a bird wrapped in a plastic bag or a turtle with a straw up its nose. And that's a big problem with plastic, that in our environment, it can choke wildlife, it gets mistaken for food, so they'll eat it, and it can cause a variety of problems and disrupt our natural biodiversity. We use so much plastic and so much becomes waste that it's really not surprising that a large amount of waste makes its way into our environment. Some studies suggest that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish, which is absurd, that in the next, 20 to 30 years, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean. Next slide. I got ahead of myself. Well, this was, the same thing, but there's an extra stat on here that also by 2050, every seabird species on the planet will be eating plastic. And as Sue said, we're already past the 90% point. But every species, not just individual birds, but there will not be a single species of bird left that will not be consuming plastic within the next few decades. So next slide. It's not just harm to wildlife when it comes to plastic. Plastic pollution also hurts our infrastructure and our wallets. Plastic bags, and this is especially why we at Penn Environment target this as a local issue. Plastic bags clog storm drains, making the effects of heavy rainfall and flooding worse. They get tied up in recycling machinery and infrastructure, which can make recycling cost prohibitive, can cause it to fail completely. These costs get passed down to residents, normal people. Single-use plastics are expensive to deal with as litter, as illegal dumping, even proper disposal, either recycling of plastics that can be recycled or disposal for those that can't, is expensive and poses a cost that's either carried by a township or by the taxpayers. So next slide. PennDOT spends millions of dollars every year cleaning up roadside litter, and plastic is the most common form of that litter. A study of 9 municipalities in Pennsylvania found that they spend close to $70 million every year on litter and illegal dumping. And if it's that big of a problem for our biggest cities who have the most resources to deal with the problem, it's certainly a problem for our smaller communities who have fewer resources. So the next slide. Plastic comes from somewhere. Sue mentioned this, that plastic comes from fossil fuels. And traditionally, that's been petroleum. But more and more increasingly, plastic is being made from natural gas that is extracted right here in Pennsylvania. It's extracted through fracking, and a lot of that natural gas is used to make new plastic products, especially single-use plastic products. So it's not a question for us of, are we going to be tackling waste issues or are we tackling climate change? Our use of plastic products drives the extraction of fossil fuels, which harms our air quality, harms our water quality, our wildlife, but it also harms our climate too. So these are all interrelated issues, and it really gives us sort of we call it a cradle to grave threat in Pennsylvania, where every step of its lifespan, from when plastic is extracted to the creation of the product, to when we use it, to when we get rid of it, that plastic is causing some sort of harm to us. So next slide. The last thing I want to talk about is human health. Sue mentioned microplastics. Unlike an apple or a piece of paper, plastic doesn't biodegrade in our environment. It just breaks into tinier and tinier pieces of plastic. I'm sure we've all seen this in the news, but microplastics. They're pieces of plastic that are about 5 millimeters in any dimension. They're in our air, they're in our food, they're in our water. At Penn Environment, we've tested over 100 rivers, lakes, and streams for microplastics, including 50 exceptional value, high quality, and Class A trout streams all across the state. Those 50, they're our best protected waterways, the ones that have to hit certain water quality standards. And of all these more than 100 waterways that we've sampled, All of them had microplastics. Not a single one was free of plastic pollution. We've also tested tap water in 4 different cities across the state. All our tap water had microplastics in it. I won't go into the methodology of our testing here, but if you want to know more in the Q&A, I'm happy to talk about that testing project. But next slide. Because we breathe in microplastics and we're drinking them in and we're eating them with our food, whether you eat vegetarians or just plants, or if you're eating animals too, you are consuming microplastics with your food most likely. Because of all that, a study by the World Wildlife Fund estimates that we ingest about 5 grams of plastic every week just from living your life, which is, in perspective, about the weight of a credit card or single-use plastic bag. So every week, just from eating, breathing, and drinking, you are consuming a plastic bag, which is crazy. And that plastic sort of stays in our bodies too. There's a lot of science being done on the health effects of microplastics, the health effects of plastic pollution. But it's not good at all.
My hands are all.
If you're not on mute, if you could go on mute, please. But microplastics can contain chemicals, either chemicals that are in the plastic from when they're made, or when they're in our environment, especially our waterways, they sort of act like sponges and can draw in chemicals from around them. So things like, I think this is the correct slide. So things like lead or PCBs or PFAS, all these chemicals can end up in the microplastics that we eat, that we breathe, that we drink. They end up in our wildlife. And so not only are our wildlife consuming these chemicals, but we're consuming them too. They're hormone disruptors. They harm our endocrine system. They've been linked to birth defects, reproductive issues, developmental disorders, and certain types of cancer. On the slide here is some of the waterways we've tested around the state. These are the first 50 we did, so not the cleanest and most pristine, but more of our iconic waterways, including from Presque Isle. So next slide. So what do we do if plastic is everywhere, if it's in everything, and if it doesn't go away? The solution is to get rid of it. So we at Penn Environment believe in tackling the problem upstream. If we can stop the source of plastic rather than dealing with the waste that is already out there, then we can put a real dent in the problem. So we've been working on this at the local level, working to pass bans on certain types of single-use plastics. These plastics are everywhere, things like plastic bags or styrofoam containers. We have alternatives to them, especially reusable green alternatives. And these plastics harm us and our environment at every stage of their lives. If we can get rid of them, if we can turn off the tap and eliminate single-use plastics early, then we can sort of put a dent in the problem. So far in Pennsylvania, there have been 24 ordinances passed tackling single-use plastics. Narberth was the first to take action way back in 2018. They banned plastic straws and passed a 10-cent fee on plastic bags. Following year, Westchester passed a ban on plastic bags and straws. Philadelphia passed a ban on plastic bags. There has been pushback and challenges to overcome. If we can go to the next slide. Or actually, this slide is good. So this is a little bit of a timeline, but there's been some pushback after Narberth and Westchester took action. The state legislature, as part of the budget, passed a preemption law, a ban on local plastic bans. So we worked with several municipalities, including Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Westchester, Narberth, and Lower Merion, along with the Clean Air Council, to sue the legislature over this preemption, to bring that power back to our local communities. At the end of 2021, they allowed the preemption to expire. And if we can go to the next slide. And since then, we've seen a ton of action on this issue. 11 municipalities, that's our cities, townships, and boroughs, banned plastic bags in 2022 alone. Those included the first bans on polystyrene foam, which we often call styrofoam. It also included the second ban on polystyrene, the third ban, and the fourth ban. In 2023, there's also been a ton of action, bringing us to 24 bans total all around the state. These 24 cover about 2.4 million Pennsylvanians, which is over 18% of our state's population. When they're all in effect, they could eliminate around 875 million single-use plastic bags that otherwise would get landfilled, would get incinerated, or would end up straight in our environment. That's over 4,800 tons of plastic waste. So we know these laws work. The city of Philadelphia released a study on the effectiveness of their plastic bag ban. They found that plastic bag use in the city decreased by over 90% after just 1 year of their ban being in place. That was a decrease equivalent to filling Philadelphia City Hall with plastic bags every 8 hours. If you've ever seen Philadelphia City Hall, it's a huge building, and we use a lot of plastic bags, and these laws are effective at getting rid of them. Reusable bag use, the amount of people not using bags shoots up, and that's all just within the first year. Similar studies all across the country really have shown that these are effective laws. So next slide. So to help communities pass these, both EACs, bird towns, local citizens who are concerned and want to get involved, we've developed at Penn Environment a toolkit of resources. This toolkit includes model legislation. I put some details up here, but I'm sure we can talk about that in the Q&A. Based on best practices all around the country, the models have been used as a basis for most of the ordinances passed to date in the state. And these laws, they're not just about getting rid of plastic. They're about encouraging people to use the best alternative, the reusable alternative. So if we can get rid of plastic bags and encourage people to bring their own bag from home, maybe there will be a ripple effect into the rest of their lives, bringing reusable water bottles with them, reusable thermos to the coffee shop instead of getting a foam coffee cup. And the list goes on and on and on. There's a bunch of details about this, and certainly we can address that in the Q&A. So next slide. I'll skip this for now. We can talk about that in the Q&A. Next slide. All right, and so lastly, I just wanted to cover a few resources on the screen here. You can follow up with me directly, but the first link up there is for our toolkit that we've developed. It doesn't just have model ordinances, it has studies, it has research, it has surveys, it has sample petitions and emails and information, and it also has the most up-to-date list of everyone who has taken action in Pennsylvania, if you're curious who's passed one of these ordinances, and details on what they passed. The next link is more information on our work on microplastics. That's our most recent survey, but we have 2 different studies we've done covering pretty much the entire state. And then the last link is for information on recycling. It's a bit different from what we're talking about tonight, but if you're interested on Pennsylvania's recycling law, how it's been doing since it was passed in the 1980s, where it's falling short, and how local communities, the state, counties, etc., can fix our recycling systems, you can check out that link. But with that, I think I've been talking for long enough, so I will stop there, and I believe I'm passing it on to Richard, correct?
Yep. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Metz from Springfield Township, and I'll be talking a little bit about the Southeastern Pennsylvania Single-Use Plastics Coalition. Next slide. So after Philadelphia passed their single-use plastic bag ban, I had this idea, why don't we do something like that in Springfield Township? And what I did in sort of talking with one of the more environmentally friendly commissioners, because really this is all at the local level about politics. So I talked to him and he was like, well, you know, because a lot of townships don't want to be the first one doing anything. He said, why don't you see what other townships are doing? And this led me to kind of form this whole coalition. Basically, the idea is mutual aid, peer-to-peer, and best practices and support. So those 4 things are what we do in the coalition. Basically, the idea is in numbers, there's strength. If the townships nearby you are passing something like this, the commissioners in your township look at that, and it makes it much easier to do something in your township. So how does it function? Basically, about every other month, we have a few speakers. There's about 50 different townships who are part of the Single-Use Plastics Coalition. It started out just in Montgomery County, now it's Bucks, Chester, and Delaware County, although now I think Chester County is going to start to form their own group. Basically, as Farron has said, the state is not going to do anything now. It's too politically divided, so it's up to the townships if we want to do this. So we have 2 to 3 speakers at the beginning of each meeting. They can be experts in someone like Beyond Plastics or talking about trash or recycling, or they can be members of other EACs who've just passed their ordinance. The idea is that new people coming in can see that this is possible, that somebody just like them, in another township nearby or even further away, who's on their EAC, that this can be done. Basically, we're just discussing processes, reasons, challenges, the strategies they used. And then we have discussion topics. And those are really interesting discussions with people from all over the area on the fee, for the bag. How does this work with restaurants? What are the different exemptions that different townships use? What about compostable bags? What about helping sort of equity issues, about helping indigent people in your community afford this? So it's a very kind of exciting meeting every other month. It's great to see all these different environmentalists there. And I believe that we've been making a real difference. Now, at each meeting, we also have Farron, and we also have Logan Weld from the Clean Air Council as kind of experts. And they're also giving advice about what's happening regionally. And they're also there to give more expert advice because basically we're not experts, and so it's we're learning more and more, but it's good to have experts there. And then we have a township roundup where each person from each township will talk about what's going on in their township. Did they just pass it? How close are they? What are the stumbling blocks, and what advice can they get from things? So that's basically the Single-Use Plastics Coalition. Next slide. So we discovered that there's a lot of information out there about single-use plastic bags. Don Hamp, I work with Don on this Single-Use Plastics Coalition. He's from Montgomery Township. He's a former chemist from Dow. He's really a great organizer, and he's also very good with computers. So he put together this guidebook, and basically what he found and what your commissioners will do is they'll start to look up single-use plastic bags, and they'll find industry websites. There's a lot of bad propaganda out there about single-use plastics and about plastics in general. So we wanted to have sort of a repository for information. And there was so much information coming in that Don was really great in terms of organizing it. And we're constantly updating it. And again, you can email me or Don to get access to this guidebook. It's a Google document, so we don't want anybody, we don't just want anybody looking at it. The guidebook is about 35 pages long. It's basically 4 different sections: why the action is needed, how to reduce single-use plastic bags, objections to single-use plastic bags. You're going to have commissioners and township residents are going to have lots of objections. So there's a whole section which says how to answer all these different questions, all these different objections. And then there's a new section that we're doing of beyond bags. What more can we do here? And there's about 20 different subsections. Don has done this great attributions thing. So each fact that he's putting out there, he's kind of telling you where it's from, because there will always be people in your community who will say, where did you get this? Who says so, right? Because it's really, sometimes it's a battle of words, The guidebook contains simple sample PowerPoint presentations, because you will need to make a PowerPoint to your commissioners. It contains sample ordinances, suppliers of recycled bags, other township websites, surveys, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it has the meeting notes and video from our various meetings. Okay, next slide. Next one. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit as briefly as I can about what happened here in Springfield Township, which in many cases, it was much like other townships. The situation with politics, as I'm sure all of you know, is that every township is different. And it's been really interesting to me to see different townships and how they change, how they're similar. There's a lot of similarities, but Springfield Township, may not be as progressive as Cheltenham, but may be a little more progressive than some other township. It really depends on, first of all, next slide, starting to go to a township meeting and or go to an EAC meeting and say, where are the commissioners on this? It's really a very local thing. So in 2021, I began doing research on this and outreach, and that was a really interesting process of starting to talk to EACs around me. The We Can Serve PA website has a great list of all the different townships that have environmental advisory commissions or EACs. Now, those aren't the only people who want to work on this. There are townships that don't have EACs, and they can. The problem is, how do you contact them? And your township may not have an EAC, and then you just want to start to contact us or start to contact commissioners. You want to be able to work with other people. This is about, as you can see, from September 2021 to about 2023. That was the process. It took a while. Some townships can do it in only a year or a year and a half. It took us about 2 years. And it's really good to work with someone else in your township on this, because there's a lot of small tasks involved. So I actually joined the EAC, the Environmental Advisory Commission, because I thought this is how this process is done. All these EACs make recommendations to their commissioners, and that's how this happens. We presented in March of 2022 the plastics problem and a survey proposal. We almost got away with not having to do the survey, but one commissioner requested it. I started to look at lots of other surveys. It was great always to be talking with Farron and like, oh, who's the contact person in Easttown or this, so I was able to get other surveys, and after 8 versions of the survey, we put out the survey over the internet. It was just basically a link on various social media sites and sort of the Facebook and township website and various other patch kind of websites, and we got about 550 responses. Now, we also did it as a paper survey at the library. So again, every township is different. Your township might have a list of businesses, and which makes it a little easier. When we did our business survey, I went around with one of the commissioners, who was the very environmentally friendly one, and we gave a survey, a business survey, which is separate, and a self-addressed stamped envelope to each, to 50 or 60 different businesses, and we got 30 responses, which was great. Some townships have a lot more businesses than that, and they can't go around and hand one to everybody. But they may have different ways of getting in touch with businesses. I know with Plymouth Meeting, they sent out their survey with their water bill, or that kind of thing. So we did these surveys, and they came in. It was about, just like many other communities, about 80% of the people were in favor, strongly in favor, or somewhat in favor of a single-use plastic bag ban. And with the businesses, it was about 50% were in favor, about 10% were against, and the others were uncertain. So that seemed to feel pretty good with us. Now, in October, and this is the challenging part, every township is different. Some townships get hung up because their commissioners don't want to introduce this, or I know with one township right now, they're waiting till after the election, because again, it's all like politics in some way. I didn't count the votes properly with my township, and it was 4-3 against. And this was disheartening, but kind of after a few days, was just pick it up. What can we do next? And they wanted to do education. We sat down with one of the swing vote commissioners, and what do you need to make this happen? And she was able to do that. I was even able to get her to talk to Farron, and that sort of thing. She was very unhappy with the fee aspect of it, but eventually she came around. There's certain communities and certain people who don't want the government to impose anything. This is kind of a thing these days. And this helps everyone. It's healthy for everyone, but there's some people who just have a different view of government, even if they're in government. So this is something that you really have to talk about with the EAC and with your commissioners. We reached out to the high schools. I had reached out to them earlier. They were really terrific. They had their own survey, which was really, really great. And they were starting to come to meetings and to come to Board of Commissioner meetings and speak in favor of this. And that was really, really important. Next slide. One of the big things that was very important was to have Farron and 2 other township EAC members at a community education meeting. Some commissioners felt that this was just too fast, so it was great to have somebody from the nearby townships say, this is what we did, and this is the reality of what we did, because then everybody could feel at ease that this wasn't going to threaten their whole way of life, that other townships have been doing this and they're fine about this. So that community meeting I thought was excellent. There were lots of questions, lots of discussion. And then we were able to reintroduce the proposal. Strangely, one of the more conservative members of our commissioners, he saw this community education meeting and maybe heard a lot from his constituents, because you really have to reach out to your community members to constantly sort of email their commissioners. That's what I mean by politics, is that politicians respond to pressure and to what their community wants. They want to get reelected. So in August, we had a 5-1 in favor vote, which was terrific. The only hiccup was that I hadn't looked at the renewed ordinance that was revised. It didn't include anything about restaurants, but I was able to talk to one of the commissioners, and we introduced an amendment to correct that problem so that restaurants are included in this. And that will be voted on next month, but it seems like from what the commissioners are saying that that is guaranteed to pass. And then we will walk around to the businesses with an FAQ sheet and a little sort of sign, say, because each business has to have a sign in their window. And we want to say, just let them know this is happening. I've spent some time on the phone with various corporate people at Giant and in Acme, and they're very hard to get a hold of. They're very hard to discuss things. They don't really want to talk to me, but they know what's going on here, and they're kind of ready for this, and it's generally not a big deal because they've already been doing this in other states and in Philadelphia and in other townships now. The last thing we'll have is a take a bag, leave a bag unit for the administration building for people who can't afford something. And we will continue to do education. We've had articles in the township newsletter. So that's pretty much from the local level what we've done here. And please email me if you want to become part of the coalition or if you have other questions about it from a kind of local political standpoint. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I'm going to move on.
Sure.
Oh, this is the Farron or Richard, do you want to talk about this real quick?
You can do that, Farron, if you like.
Sure. Yeah. This is a table of everyone who has passed an ordinance or who is part of the coalition and is considering an ordinance. It also has dates when they've passed, enforcement information, what types of policies they include. If you are part of an EAC or a bird town and you want to join the coalition, you can contribute to this document to help share your progress or see the progress of other communities as well. You are also always welcome to send me directly the information, and I can put it on Penn Environment's website, where we include information like dates, the policy types, websites for those that have passed, just not the information for what's in progress.
Good.
Okay, thank you. And then also we wanted to mention this video, Richard.
Oh yeah, this particular video, and I know there's probably others, to me seemed like the most persuasive in kind of discussing, because this guy's an epidemiologist, he's a doctor, and he seems to be like one of the best experts in exactly what are the health effects of single use of plastic in your body. There's a lot of discussion back and forth about it, but I found this 50-minute presentation to be he was very, very confident. It was very persuasive, and people who are uncertain about things or who want to know if they have the inkling, this video was very, very persuasive and helpful and answered a lot of questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Heidi Shiver. I'm from Birdtown, Pennsylvania. I've been working with Richard and Farron for a while, and kind of started noticing that a lot of the EACs that were adopting these ordinances or working towards them, a lot of them overlap with our Birdtown program. So I thought that was a really interesting, and we really want to make a note of this. So this is a list. I hope it's as complete as possible that I know of, and I did include a couple folks too that are also working on it. It's not complete. There are a few additional bird towns I know that are working on it, including my own township. But that was just to point this out. But as we learn more and more about these microplastics, there's always been this focus about how plastics in general, especially those single-use plastic bags, are affecting seabirds. But actually, the research is showing that it's affecting all birds. Obviously, it's affecting humans, but even all the way down to the smallest songbird is being affected by these microplastics. So this really has become really an important issue that we really need to address as bird towns as well. So that's why I included this as this slide. So I also want to talk about PA Audubon chapters and how they can be involved. So possible roles for Audubon chapters include educating members about how plastics negatively impact birds and wildlife. I found an excellent article, which I'll share in the toolkit. It's very long, but it's just very recent research, exactly what I was saying, that these microplastics are in everybody. They're in birds, they're wildlife, and it was really an enlightening article. Another possible role for Audubon chapters is to energize your members about this issue, educate them about it, give them information about it, maybe include it on your website. Also provide letters of support to your local EACs, your parks and rec boards, your municipalities in the area, letting them know that you're there to help them, to support them in passing these kind of legislation, for passing ordinances to eliminate and ban single-use plastic bags. Also writing letters to the editor. That's really important too, is getting that information out. That's another way to educate people in your community, letting people know how you stand on this as an Audubon chapter. It's a really great way to do that. And again, also support local initiatives. So I want to give you an example of one Audubon chapter. I used to be the president of Bucks County Audubon Society. I was on the board for several years. And I helped create the advocacy committee. And I want to just share some of the things that we were doing as an advocacy committee. as an Audubon chapter. So we created a blog. Each of us wrote an article about how single-use plastics were impacting our life and what we were doing to change that and change our ways, and like reducing, using drinking water from a plastic bottle, or reducing how many, single-use plastic bags you were using. So the blog is really fun. It's a really great way to involve your members and also your board members. We also were tracking the work done by Penn Environment and Richards Group. Penn Environment and Richards Group have been amazing partners. They're a wonderful resource. They're always so agreeable and eager to help and support our Audubon chapters and provide the information that we're looking for. So they were awesome to work with, and we tracked what was going on with them. Every advocacy committee, we would talk about what we had heard or what was going on at Richards meeting, or what was going on with Penn Environment. So we met and communicated with them regularly. And then also we took those Penn Environment Take Action notices, and we use those in our e-actions. So we created this 5 and 5. It's called 5 actions you can do in 5 minutes. So this is something that goes out every week as an email to all our members. And regularly we include the Penn Environment Take Action notices in that. So it's a really easy, fun way to really get that information out to your members, and something that they can easily take action on immediately. And then it also informed our own work. It informed our work for our own EACs. I'm actually on Doylestown Township's EAC as well. So that helped inform me of how I could do, work with this, and how I could approach my supervisors and talk with them and educate them about it as well. Solebury was successful. They were able to pass the dam. And then also Buckingham has been working on it as well. So this is just some examples of how, our advocacy committee as an Audubon Society addressed this. I hope it informs you guys as well. And then I just wanted to mention the toolkit again. I know, Farron, you've already mentioned this, but I just want to again, a shout out to all the things that are available on that as well. There's those model local plastic ordinances, sample sign-on letters to businesses and community support. There's excellent letters to the editor, what they can look like. It really helps to not just start cold. It's really great to have some samples to work from. Also, sample petition languages is really helpful. And then there's just tons of information, education, and reports, as well as the information that Richard's document includes as well. Okay, so I think that's the end of our presentations. And so I think we're going to turn it over to Sue for, I see there's lots and lots of questions in chat. There's over 20 I see. So Sue, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Farron, you went ahead and answered some of them, but I'm going to ask you to repeat some of your answers. Let me see over here. Okay, have Audubon chapters or bird towns, EACs, etc., provided reusable bags to their members and community members?
I can't, I'll sort of repeat what I put in the chat, but I can't really speak to what Audubon or Birdtown chapters have done, because I haven't experienced that personally, but some EACs have provided reusable bags. I have a great one that's co-branded from Easttown Township's EAC and the Chester County Solid Waste Authority, where there are these very nice tote bags that they gave out right at the start of their plastic bag ban, so residents can get them. But a cool thing a lot of places have been doing, besides having businesses like Wawa or Target or a lot of other places will give out reusable bags as a branding opportunity, because it's a good hook for them to say, look, we're getting rid of plastic. Here's our very nice Wawa tote bag. One thing a couple places are doing is they're saying lots of people have too many reusable bags already, and there's some people who don't have enough. So we'll create a place where you can drop off reusable bags if you have, if you don't want to hang on to so many, and then we'll get them to the people who need them. That way we're not creating more reusable bags. Everyone who needs one can get one, and it's sort of a nice little program that's being explored. So that's another option.
I have a question about that. In your experience, have you found that retailers who don't use plastic bags anymore have paper bags there that they use, and there's no charge to the customer for that? Or generally are retailers like grocery stores charging when they provide the bag?
In most cases in Pennsylvania, we're trying to get people to make that charge for a paper bag mandatory. Because, well, one benefit for a retailer of plastic is it's cheap and paper is more expensive. So having a mandatory charge helps them bridge that cost gap so the businesses don't suffer as much. But having a little penalty like 10 or 15 cents per paper bag is sort of like a psychological reminder where you're not going to forget your reusable bag again if you have to pay 15 cents for one paper bag, 30 for 2 bags, 45 for 3. once you go shopping. So once that little flip is switched with that fee, you're more likely to remember the reusable. And that's what this boils down to. You want people to bring their own bag. And so that fee is sort of a key component that we recommend including.
Yeah, I think I heard somewhere that if you have like a, oh, what's the name of the card? Access card or something like that for food, they wouldn't necessarily charge people with an access card because they don't want to penalize a poor person. So I guess that's an
Yeah.
option too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's on a case-by-case basis. Like Pittsburgh, who put theirs into effect last weekend, they were the first ones to do this in the state. We worked with them to just say, if there's someone on food assistance like SNAP or WIC, anywhere that they use that card, they wouldn't be charged for the bag.
That's a good idea. There is a question here. Is this recording going to be available afterwards? And yes, it will. I think Lee, you said on the Pennsylvania Audubon Council website then. Okay. All right. Let's see. There. There was someone who asked a question about, does a Dollar General, or does anyone know of a Dollar General or Walmart that does not have those carousels? And someone said about a Walmart in West Norriton, where I'm not familiar where that is out, but and the questioner wondered how they got them to discontinue that and how the community responded.
By banning plastic bags. West Norton passed a ban on single-use bags, so their businesses had to comply. Any state that has a statewide ban, like our neighbors in New Jersey, all those businesses have to comply. So a lot of the time we see big chains like Walmart, like Dollar General, they make it's easier for them to transition because they've had to do it before. And we even see in a couple places like Pittsburgh where they don't have a Walmart, but Walmart sometimes delivers in the city. Pittsburgh, Walmart is saying they won't use plastic bags for delivery in Pittsburgh. They'll charge 10 cents per paper bag. So even though they're not covered by it because they're not in the city, they're still complying with it.
Okay, yeah. You know, off the top of your head, do you know how many states have banned single-use plastic bags?
I believe there are 11, but I could check that number. It's also available on our partner organization, Environment America's website as well.
Okay.
And I can
All
find
right.
that link.
Yeah, you had mentioned New Jersey and New York. I wasn't aware of that. Okay. Let's see, there was a question about Erie County, Pennsylvania, and I live in Erie County, and I know one of our participants tonight is from Erie County's EAC, but Fred, if you want to unmute and give your opinion about this.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, this was actually for Freda Tepfer in Erie.
Okay.
I'm
Good.
sorry. Yeah. Well, maybe later on she'll get an answer that. Okay, I'm going to move on. Somebody commented about the Richard Metz. You had the video that you suggested people watch with Phil Landrigan, and this woman, said that he is the absolute best in the universe, and he worked to get the lead out of gasoline. That is tremendous. Man, we're lucky to have him on our side. Question, will we always have plastic garbage bags? Anybody?
So most of these laws don't really cover the garbage bags. It's only about the bags you would get at checkout. So you'd still be able to get garbage bags from a store. You'd still be able to use plastic garbage bags. There are some places that are exploring going back to not using plastic garbage bags because we had decades of trash removal where we didn't have plastic bags to put them in. So you can always talk to your township or borough if they're the ones who do the trash collection, or if you work directly with a waste hauler and you don't want to use a plastic bag for your trash collection, you could talk to them to see if they would accept it without a plastic bag. They probably won't, but if there's a chance they don't, then it's always a good question to ask. And I saw a related question about reusing plastic bags for your garbage. Unfortunately, not enough people reuse their plastic grocery bags for their garbage or their pet waste in order to offset the drawbacks of using plastic grocery bags. So you would still be able to buy a garbage bag. If you're reusing your grocery bags now, you would have to start buying grocery bags or finding out an alternative if your waste hauler has an alternative. But overall, the benefits of banning the checkout bags outweighs the drawbacks of some more people buying garbage bags and pet waste bags. There's just more plastic by volume and weight that we eliminate through getting rid of those plastic bags that by and large are just used once, but for some people they do reuse them.
Yeah, there's two different situations. Don Hamp and I did a little study out of a giant, and in 1 hour there were about 300 single-use plastic bags coming out of the store, and that's just sort of what we could see. And some people might have 8 or 10 in their cart. So kind of to Farron's point, you may reuse 1 or 2 of them in a week, but you're not going to be reusing 10 of them. The other thing is that we tried to have a spin-off group from the single-use plastic bag, which was a sort of a looking at municipal composting. If you don't have wet garbage in your trash, you don't really need a plastic bag lining your can. You can use a paper bag. So people who normally compost, they're probably, it's very easy for them to use a paper bag. The problem with municipal compostings, more than this meeting, media does it. The problem is finding a site for it. There's a few different private haulers who do that, but that's still, according to the Department of Environmental Protection, is still a little ways away. They have very strict sort of licensing of facilities requirements, but that's certainly one way for people to switch right away to not having a plastic bag in their trash can, is just, have an outside compost if that's available in your area or in your backyard, if you have one.
That would be ideal. Yeah. And another question, I don't know if anybody can answer. How do you make a charge for paper bags mandatory? I've asked for it for years at my local supermarket. They don't care.
You sort of package it into the ban. So your township, your borough, your city is able to mandate that you can ban the plastic bags, and then any bag provided by a retailer has to carry a minimum charge of, we recommend 15 cents. Some people do 10 cents, some go as high as 20 or 25, but it just becomes part of the law. And then the businesses have to charge that. And then the business gets to keep it. They can decide what they're going to do with it. Giant Eagle has said that any paper bag fee that they're collecting is going to go to watershed and conservation organizations in the area. At least for Pittsburgh Giant Eagle locations, other businesses have donated them. They often use it just to offset their costs, especially for small businesses. So it's part of the law.
Thank you. That was interesting, useful. Here's one. Our grocery store has a bin for single-use plastic bags. What really happens to them? I've often wondered about that too.
It depends on the bin. And it's really hard to say, because for the store collecting those plastic bags, for them, just collecting it and having someone pick it up from them is recycling. They've done their part. And it's hard to track it from where it goes. We have a partner group in California that has put little trackers in plastic bags in those bins. ABC has done the same thing. And they found that most of the plastic bags you put in one of those bins are going to a landfill or an incinerator or are getting shipped overseas. Some of them do go to organizations that might make a bench out of it. I've heard a couple businesses say that when they collect plastic bags, they're able to turn them into new uniforms. But just the sheer volume of plastic bags that we use every day is too much to turn into a bench or a uniform or something like that. And it's very expensive to do that. So by and large, they get collected. There's nowhere for them to go, and so they'll get sent to a landfill, an incinerator, or shipped overseas.
And there's also, as I said before, there's sort of massive propaganda efforts by supermarkets and plastic companies to tell you that these things are being recycled. So I think the evidence that Farron was suggesting about, just with this 6 ABC poll, with 21 out of the 24 trackers, going to garbage facilities, is pretty clear to me.
Yeah, that's all the questions that I can see in comments in the chat. Does anybody else have anything else they would like to add? And at this point, if you wanted to just unmute yourself and ask your question, I think that'd be fine since we're nearing the end.
I have a
Yes,
question about
I
that.
have a question.
Okay, how about Greta first?
Okay, my question is just about the information that Richard and Farron just gave about what happens to plastic bags in those plastic bag bins. Could you put a reference in the chat or how to
I
find
will.
that information?
Well, I know that I sent something out about the Channel 6 ABC study, which was actually an article on the Channel 6 ABC website.
Okay.
But I will get that out to you as well. I will send something out about that.
And then Dawn had a question.
Yes, my internet's been on and off, so I'm back. Wouldn't it be much better than to have stores charge you for paper bags to give you a credit if you use your own bag, which is done at least by one store in our area, which is McCaffrey's.
Yeah.
It's the old carrot and stick idea.
Yeah, so there have been communities that have tried to do a reusable bag deposit, or they give you a discount, or they give you some money back for using your own bag. Unfortunately, studies on those have found that they're just less effective than a charge. Having a small 10 or 15 cent fee is really just more effective at getting people to bring their own bag, to remember they're reusable, because they're actually seeing the cost of a bag. Whereas if you're getting money back, you're not really seeing it as a cost, you're just seeing it as a slight benefit. Most of the time, if there's a return or some sort of positive stimulus, the effect is about the same as if there was nothing at all.
Thank you.
Here's a question in the chat. How about the hard plastic boxes used by supermarkets to sell fresh produce?
By and large, it depends on what the plastic is made out of. So if you look at the little number in the chasing arrows, that doesn't necessarily mean the plastic can be recycled. It just tells you what the plastic is made out of. And if you see a number 1 or number 2, which a lot of hard-sided grocery store boxes are made out of, you can recycle that plastic in your single stream or any other recycling program. You can check with your waste hauler or your township or borough, if they're the ones who do it, about what other types of plastic they accept. Sometimes maybe a number 5 plastic would get accepted and recycled as well. But if there's a number 6 or any other number on that box, by and large, it can't be recycled. And so it's going to be going into a landfill or an incinerator, and that's the best thing to do with it.
And Andrea had a comment regarding the trash bag question. You're wondering how successful certifiable compostable bags could be, even if they are more expensive than traditional kitchen trash bags.
I think that, and there's various opinions about this. It seems right now that compostable trash bags, I use them, I think they're like a half step. They're like a transition for now. It's unclear unless you have certain certifications on the actual box or bag, whether, like, most of them are not home compostable. They're going to be only compostable in some kind of very specific facility, of which I don't even think there is one in Pennsylvania. I think the good thing about compostable bags is they're not going to decay to petroleum products, but they're still going to take a very long time to decay. They're not, you're going to have to throw them in the trash. They're not quite as thick as plastic bags. So I think there's still a ways to go on that. And there's questions about what's actually in them that I will use them, but I'm not totally, I don't think that they're the solution. They're just like a sort of a stopgap.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a compostable produce bag from the local food co-op hanging on the chicken wire that surrounds my compost bin for about 1.5 years, and it's shriveling up, but it's still there. So
Yeah.
oh gosh. Yeah. Any more questions and comments or anything?
So I'm just going to jump to the next slide just to say thank you to all of you. Lee, I just want to say thank you to Lee, Sue, Farron, Richard, for being here, for being part of our panel discussion. Thank you to everyone for attending tonight. And I want to go ahead and stop sharing just so we can have an open discussion if needed. But remember, we will provide a copy of the presentation and links to all the participants. It will be available on PA Audubon Council's site. And I'll be putting a toolkit together for the bird town. So I wanted to just go ahead and open this up so people can unmute or show their video if they'd like to ask some more questions to make it a little bit more of a dialogue here. Lee, I hope that was okay.
And let me just say, this will go on our YouTube channel, so you'll see the whole slideshow. You'll hear all the commentary, and and all the excellent responses that we got to the various questions that were added. So for those who want to remain and ask some other questions, you're free to do so.
I wanted to ask a question. In York, Pennsylvania, we have a new company called CRDC. Has anyone ever heard of that?
Yeah.
It's a global company. It was started in Costa Rica, and they have a branch in South Africa and in Australia. And a father and son from New Jersey wanted to start one in this country, and they chose York, Pennsylvania, because we probably made it very attractive to them. And I don't really know what CRDC stands for, except Costa Rica, but it's CRDC Global, and you can go to their website. And they take 1 through 7 plus styrofoam and plastic bags, and they turn it into what they call resin 8, which is building blocks for buildings. And actually, WellSpan, our healthcare conglomerate here is called WellSpan. They're building a new building, and they are going to use at least some of their blocks. But we are thrilled to have them, and we've been promoting it at our Audubon meetings and handing out the big bags to collect the plastic. And also at my church, I got them started on it too. When we first started participating with that, I got a very angry phone call from, I'm on the board of the York Audubon, so from someone in another Audubon branch. And she said, you're just what's that word they use with alcoholics? You're enabling. You're just enabling the plastic companies to keep making more plastic. And she was totally angry. And I have a little more pragmatic attitude than that. I mean, plastic is a very useful material, and it's not going to disappear from the face of the earth. But, going back to basics with reduce, reuse, and recycle. And so that's how I countered that. But I just thought you folks might be glad to know about that company, CRDCglobal.com.
Sherry, can you have York Audubon, you can send it to the council email and give us
Sure.
a link for more information, and we'll share that.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Sherry.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, we might be good here. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I guess once again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you to the panel. Heidi actually really coordinated pulling this whole thing together. It was like a 5-ring circus, but we got it together, and I hope that all of you found it as worthwhile as I did. Extraordinary information, and again, we'll make sure you know where to access the recording and the resources that were identified here. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You all.
Thank you.
Thank you.